Commissioner, and I was expecting him, but I think we'll start.
We got 5, right?
Oh, all we need is 4
Right. I just counted and I said,
as a quorum. Our quorum's a simple majority, and here he is, on cue.
hey, there he is.
Welcome.
Now we got 6. Got plenty.
He does that to get attention.
Well, he's taking Christine's spot.
Okay. Oh, not a
That's
problem.
all right. That's all right.
Doc, you're paying 10%.
We have a quorum now? I'm sorry about that.
Well, we're just about, except for Terry, who's absent. Well, I will call the meeting to order and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the November 21st meeting of the Village of Pinehurst Historic Preservation Commission. The purpose of the commission is to approve certificates of appropriateness for new construction or major work, and to do so by conducting hearings and findings of fact when applications come before us. Our mission is to take no action except to preserve and approve that which is congruous with the special character of the Village of Pinehurst Historic District. I am Molly Gwynn, the chairman of the commission, and on my right is Eric Von Saltzen, John Taylor, and Richard Vincent, and on my left, Jim McChesney and Tom Schroeder. Also on my left, Peter Hughes, senior planner, and Kelly Brown, administrative assistant. Absent today is Terry Lertz due to a travel schedule. We have a quorum, so we can proceed. Just a reminder, this is a quasi-judicial hearing, so anyone desiring to testify must be sworn in, and we are required to consider only facts presented in this hearing. The proceedings are video recorded. The first order of business is to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Is there any discussion, any amendment to the minutes?
I have some issues, Madam Chairman.
Yes?
On what I guess is page 3 of the minutes, several items. First, at the top of the page, we have the statement, upon due consideration of the application, et cetera, the applicant, the HPC concluded that the applicant has satisfied the burden, et cetera. That's incorrect. That statement precedes a discussion of a motion that was ultimately either amended, withdrawn, or defeated, one or the other. And that highlights an issue more generally, which is the format that we're following here has a statement about what the HPC has done, which appears in the minutes before the HPC does it. That is, before we adopt a motion. And this happens to be pretty dramatic because we're having this says that we did something that in fact we didn't do. Following on down in what I guess is the 4th paragraph of that page, refers to a motion that I made to amend the pending exception. It stated here that the project was not in conformity with the guidelines. My motion was that there was one aspect of the project that was not in conformity with the guidelines, and that's an important distinction. And that same issue comes down past the middle of the page where it talks about the second motion. And again, we have the statement that the HPC concluded as follows, preceding the motion in which the HPC did that. I think the order, therefore, should be changed. And then in the description of what it is that we concluded, I think it's important that we not lose the fact that we found there was only one aspect of this project that was not in conformity with our guidelines. That is, the parking was in the front yard. The technical non-conformance with our guidelines. But I think it's important that it be noted that there was only that one issue. So that I would suggest that the language be amended to read that one aspect of the project as proposed, comma, that is, comma, location of parking in the front yard, comma, is not in conformity, etc.
And that is easily changed, but the rest of it, I don't know whether we need to delete a section for example, that we did have the motion, that my memory was we had the motion, and then it was discussed. I think the motion was seconded as well.
It was made and seconded.
And then we discussed it.
Discussed it. And my suggestion had been to simply amend the motion. I think,
Vote on it?
yes.
We ended up voting on it.
Voting on it
We
and voted
ended
it down.
up deciding to defeat it.
Right.
To get it out off the record. And that's correctly reflected here.
And then submit a cleaner motion for what we were actually going to
That-
approve.
That's correct. That's correct.
That was my understanding, yes.
Well, because Tom withdrew the motion, John seconded that.
I think it wasn't clear whether we could withdraw the motion or not since it had been seconded, so we decided to vote on it, vote not to approve the motion, and then Eric moved an improved motion, which we ultimately,
Right, basically voting it down, cleaning the slate of that
Right.
motion that I had made, and then started all over with a brand-new motion.
so that it would be clear what we actually approved.
But Eric is also saying that the top of the page is not quite clear or correct.
Those first two, I'd call them paragraphs, are not correct because they say that
But that would have been the wording of the motion, would it not? I mean, we have to state what the motion,
yes, but this doesn't say Mr. Schroeder moved. This says this is what the HPC concluded. And we
I
didn't
see.
conclude that.
Conclusion is as a result of the vote. It can't be stated as being concluded before the vote is taken.
okay.
I'd recommend that you sit down with the clerk and work up what you think is the right things, and we'll postpone approving these until we actually see what is satisfactory information.
We will have an amended version at the next meeting. That's what we'll do. Are you willing to do that, to sit down with
Yes.
Kelly?
And
Because
I-
I think this is a little complex for us to talk about as a group.
But I do think the generic point of the language that we use is probably well made, and going forward, that should be changed as well.
Yeah, the conclusion should not be before the vote. The conclusion is only valid once it's,
Yes.
In this regard, could I ask if anybody else has a different recollection than I do? I do not believe that we imposed a condition. And it says here that we did. And if we did, then I'm just not remembering it correctly.
I thought it was an amendment.
There was a condition that they provide a letter from Moore County Utilities that they had permission to demolish
I
the
know we
building,
discussed that.
which
Oh,
they have
that
provided.
condition.
I don't think that's explained.
Okay. We will add that in.
Yes, because we were concerned about who was
Owned the place.
authorized to speak for this demolition. All right, so given that, let's have a motion to,
I make a motion to table the approval of these till our next meeting.
all right, is there a second?
Second?
Tom Schroeder moved to table the minutes until the next meeting. Eric Von Saltzen seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. The motion carried. I would like another motion at this time to enter into the public hearing portion of the meeting.
So moved.
John Taylor moved that we entered into the public hearing. Is there a second? Eric Von Saltzen seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And Peter, let me swear you in. Do you affirm that the testimony you shall give to the commission shall be the whole truth, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing to consider a request within the Pinehurst Historic District for an exterior modification to include the following: the closing in of the front gable, replacement of an existing door with a 38-inch by 50-inch window on the front of the house, the removal of an AC unit attached to the rear wall, removing a window on the right side of the home, and relocating the rear and replacing an existing 5x5 gable vent with a 25-inch by 37 vent at 83 Short Road. The property can be identified in the Moore County Tax Registry by Moore County PIN number 000-17850. The property is owned by Bart Boudreau, and the applicant is also Mr. Boudreau. We're here in this case today because the property is in fact located in the Historic District. It's located at 83 Short Road. It's sandwiched between Page Road and Dundee Road. It is zoned residential and is surrounded by residential uses as well. And this is just an aerial map showing that it's located there. The background of the property is none of the proposed changes will affect the footprint of the building. That's why we don't see a site plan in the packet this evening. The property was formerly a multi-tenant building that is being returned to a single family, which explains some of the changes to the building. The applicant has proposed to match all proposed material to the existing material on site. This evening, the applicant is proposing 2 modifications to the front of the structure: closing in the front gable, removing a door and replacing it with a window, 2 modifications on the rear, removal of an AC unit and replacement of a window, and 2 modifications on the right side of the structure, removal of a window and replacement of an existing gable vent. At this time, I'd like to submit the following documents into the record: the application package, photos of the existing structure, and the findings of fact. And then we'll invite Mr. Boudreau to continue the presentation.
And I need to swear you in as well. Bart Boudreau, do you affirm that the testimony you shall give the commission is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. And just a reminder to speak into the mic. And so why don't you lead us through the changes that you propose to make to this property?
Deal. Can you see the pictures anywhere?
Yeah,
We
can see
have
right here.
screens here, so we
Okay,
do.
all right.
And I've got your pictures as well.
Good deal. As Peter said, this was a multifamily apartment since the 60s, although it's zoned single-family still, and I'm going to take it back to a single-family residence. The house is built in 1925. I have a major internal renovation ongoing as we speak, and a lot of these tweaks outside are attached to some of those internal changes that I'll talk about. On the exterior, one of the major changes is I plan on closing in that gable. I've had a few people look at it. They don't think it's craftsman style, commensurate with the house. It's more Asian looking, and I don't like it anyway, so never did, still don't. So I'm going to close that in and put a white trim board on the bottom. What'd I do wrong already here? Uh-oh.
Take a minute.
Told me this was idiot-proof, man. There we go. And I just found this gable out on Google, and it looked pretty similar, so I just superimposed that on the front. And that's what it's going to look like, but it's got a white trim board on the bottom, then shakes to match. Those shakes are actually old hodgepodge. It's hard to match those, actually. I had to find them on the internet. You can't just buy regular shakes that are the same thickness to match. So I have some, and that's what I intend to do there. Any questions on that so far? On the left side, that's a bathroom now. Right now it was an open living room area where that door is. And actually, that side, there's going to be vanities there. So I wanted a window in lieu of the door. It just doesn't make sense having a door there at all. Those windows were actually left over from this house. They were in a closet. Well, that one was. And in the back shed, there's tons of other windows, mainly really big ones, like on the side of the house that I'm going to talk about. Back when this guy, his name was A.B. Sally, and he was a builder. He actually built all these houses, prefabbed them in the back, and moved them all over the village. Those two little cottages I redid on Dundee, he built them back there too. So he just took whatever he had, hodgepodge of different windows, whatever he had is what he used.
Yeah, and just a quick question while you got that up there. That's a 6 over, and the one that's in the front is an 8 over?
There's 6 and 8 overs all over.
Okay.
If you look across the front of the house, I'm going with a 6-1 where that door is. The one next to it that you pointed out is an 8-1. And then those 3 in the front, 2 are 6 overs, and the other one's 8 in the middle. And if you go around the house, there's a hodgepodge of a lot of different windows like that.
Well, which leads me to a question. Why did you just choose this smaller 38 by 50 inch window because it was handy?
Yes.
Well, okay.
Yes, and it matches. It's got the old leaded glass in it.
Okay.
I'm going to keep all the windows the same.
Well, except they are all different, and, you know, you're replacing a door and 2 side lights with a window that's only 38 inches wide. So it's going to change the proportions a little bit. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
But it sounds
A little
almost
bit.
like the guy that built it did it that way anyway.
yeah, and this door he probably put in the 60s, you know, to make it, when he made it into the apartments. It probably wasn't there, or maybe that was an addition too. The door's 36 inches, so the window's going to be about as wide as the door. The door's already a little cattywampus. If you look at it close, it's off kilter a bit, which is good. Now I can fit the shower next to it, and the window's going to be fine. But it looks the same as it does right now, as far as where it's centered on that wall.
So that, you had said that's going to be that's a bathroom?
That's a bathroom, yeah.
Are you removing those 2 steps to nowhere then, or do
Yeah.
they just stay?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's coming out too.
And I assume that you'll be facing, as you replace the windows, you'll be facing them with the same nice wide boards that the others are faced with?
Yeah, it's actually, the window's actually got the trim boards on it already. It's all, I have the whole window with the casement. It's just going to fit straight in there. They're 5-inch trim boards around it.
Any more questions? On this piece? On moving around to the side?
That's a massive window I was talking about that shed in the back's full of. I don't know where he got them, but it just doesn't fit the house size-wise at all.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with that. In terms of the proportions on that side.
I think it's, and then the other part on the inside, the wall in the bathroom is going to be would cut off about that much of that window too, so that's but I think it just, man, I've never brought anybody there that said, man, that window's terrible. It almost looks as bad as that louvered
No.
The thing in the
vent
front.
on the other side. They're just oversized for the house.
Well, my suggestion was that it's perhaps going to look, when you move the switch out to the smaller window is going to look a little bit too small on that wall, but
How much smaller are we going?
just a thought.
How much
just a
smaller are we going?
Suggestion.
It's, right now, it's 58 by 63.
And this is
We're going
what?
37 by 44.
Is the new window going in something that's from this house?
Yes. Well, it was in the house in a closet.
Right.
With several other things, so I assume,
You could say it's from the house.
Match any windows that are installed in the house?
yes. Albeit there's some 6 over 1s, there's some 8 over 1s, but it matches the other windows, some of the other windows in the house.
This is a 5 over 1, right?
This,
Oh.
Yeah.
10 over
10
1.
Or 10, right. Yeah. Unusual.
Massive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Window.
a really interesting window. Well, yeah, so the 6 over 1 certainly matches the one you're putting in the front to replace the door, and also the two on either side of the window on the porch. So there's some matching, and I'm just assuming these are all, and I say this advisedly, original.
I would assume. 'cause
They
were
seem
in
to
that-
be
yeah,
old
yeah,
old
that-
glass,
yeah,
old
yeah.
wood.
And I'm a big proponent of keeping old windows.
Can,
Huh?
if he can.
Absolutely, because, I've got some EPA studies that show it take about 40 years to break even on changing windows in the first place, and they don't look good. So I'd say I love the old stuff.
So the new one goes in and it's basically centered where that one is?
Yes.
Okay. They're going to take some off of both ends.
That gable vent on the other, that window up there on the top is 2x3, by the way. That's going to match that new louver I'm going to talk about in a minute on the other side, size-wise. And then the AC window units just going to come out. We're going to cover that up.
Put the shakes back over.
There's a lot, if you look at the bottom boards, there's a lot of damage on some of the shakes. I have to replace a lot of that too. Anything else on that, Molly?
More questions? So let's move around to the other side.
I just superimposed that window on there. There's that 5x6 louvered vent. That was for, they had an attic fan that I pulled out. We had those in Louisiana, believe it or not, when I was growing up, and they'd suck your hat off your head when you were in the house. But they worked, even in that heat. And that's what they had here for cooling system, so they needed that big vent. Does anybody disagree that that's proportionally kind of large for the house?
I would say it was.
And so what's going to happen when you take the window out there on the first floor? Because that window's going, what, to the side?
No, it's gone.
It's just gone. It's just gone,
And the
okay.
issue there is, I've taken a wall out in the kitchen and adjoining it with the dining room. It's going to be a big open kitchen area with a bar, console and all. And when I did that, I'm losing a lot of kitchen space, cabinet space, and I'm going to have to put the refrigerator kind of in that corner. And that's where that window is. I'm going to have landscape in there anyway. You're really not going to see it from the street.
Well-
If you're really worried about it, I could put a fake window or something, or
No, I was just questioning what was going to happen there.
I'm going to reuse that window on the other side. That's the one going on the other side of the house.
Back of the house?
Yes.
So that louvered thing is going away and you're just going to put shakes over? Is that
No,
a window like you just showed us?
See this louver over to the right?
Not on this one. Okay.
Yeah, see that picture over to the
Yeah.
right? It's 2x3. Which I think that's going to look pretty neat up there. And that's, like I said, it's the same size as on the other gable on the other side. That window I showed you is the same size as that.
I think that's a little more in proportion with that peak.
Any more questions? And I know there is more that you're going to do to this house. I mean, this is, what we're hearing today is like the first chapter.
Yeah, the other chapter is some, did y'all go around the house and look
I
around
did,
it?
I did, and you've got a lot of lumber there, so I know that there's more stuff going to be going on.
Well, the other thing we did inside, back in the old days, they had that 2x5 construction on the ceiling joists, and they're 20-foot spans, so they start sagging over time. So we sistered every ceiling joist with 2x6s. We're also doing the floor joists, because the ceiling is actually plastered too.
So a lot of that lumber on the outside goes on the inside.
Goes on the inside and in the basement. I also built a new retaining wall. I had to put a few more piers to get some of the foundation stuff done, so that's been going, most of it inside. But a lot of the extra wood left now is for some proposed changes. And let me just point one out that's coming. You see that little shed right there to the right of that? This right here, the way this roof goes,
Yeah.
it plunges into the kitchen a foot, about 8 foot. That roof plunges into the kitchen right now. Which
Goes into the house.
into the house. They had a big box there, I said, man, what's that, a vent or something? Come to find out, this roof goes in, so I'm gonna end up raising this and tying it in here, and it's gonna just straighten that gable a little bit and center it on this, so that's coming. And then, if you look in the back where all those additions were, it's a bunch of gables that come in, and it's just a slew, all those leaves pile up, it's terrible. So either take that big tree out, which nobody wants to do that, including me. So I'm gonna lift the roof some, and that's gonna cover that dead spot area that I'm gonna bring next time. But I've struggled with that, on what that needs to look like, and I finally have the drawings. Peter sent me back and said to do some additional work, and it needed it anyway, because they were missing some key pieces. So next
That's
meeting, I'm gonna
version
bring
2.
I'm bringing that next meeting, I'll have that done. That's basically it for the whole house.
Okay.
That's gonna take us through the end. And then the paint was the last. Body's gonna be this Dover white, it's an off-white. The trim, fascia, mullions on the windows, sashes, all that's gonna be that bright, extra white. And then that, the doors are gonna be green-black. It's kind of an old Charleston kind of color. It's just got a little green tint to it, which I like with that black. And the roof was changed not long ago. I'm gonna keep that. Even when I bring the new plans, when we make the addition to the roof, it'll be the same roof material and color. Then the foundation and the chimney I'm gonna leave unpainted. That's it.
More discussion? Well, my sense is that we can't really approve the whole project because we don't know the whole project.
Yeah, the roof stuff. Right.
And we could approve this piece of it, and yet I think we would be doing you a favor if we simply continued the case until the December meeting.
You mean not approve this? I've got my carpenters ready to work, and I don't have anything for them to do. That's why I brought this first, because I want to keep them moving. Whether you disapprove the roof or not, this stuff is still going to happen no matter if I do that or not, so I don't see why they have to be linked, personally.
I don't know if they have to be. There's a requirement necessarily to link them. I think there was other considerations that we were thinking about, but if this is what you tell us you're going to do, then you're going to have to fight another whole, not fight, but
Yeah, and
present
I know
another round.
you got to pay an additional fee to do it, and I'm fully prepared to do that. I want to
Okay,
keep the project
okay.
going.
I was trying to help you out on the fee side
I
by
appreciate
continuing
that.
it.
I appreciate that, and Peter tried to talk me into the same thing, not try, but just telling me the ins and outs, and I just need to keep going right now. But I appreciate you guys
Okay,
trying to help me out in that
okay,
respect.
okay.
Well, and it also sounds like you're sort of making up your mind and designing as you go along and sort of letting the project talk to you as you get further down the road.
I false started on the architectural work, had an architect, they got busy, tried somebody else, that didn't work that well. Somebody else drew some plans I hated. So it's been an iteration, and finally I have something that I think I like and that you guys are gonna like. And then Peter's helped me too on, man, that's just, realistically, I don't think that's gonna fly, or it's, just doesn't look congruous, so I've kind of worked
Yeah.
through that.
Yeah. So essentially, you are your own contractor on this?
I am,
Okay,
which is different than I've normally done.
well, yeah.
Molly, just to be clear, we're only deciding on
What he's-
appropriateness for what's in front of us.
Exactly, exactly. Basically, it's the gable and the window changes and the vent.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, I'll have my stuff back Wednesday of next week and to Peter, and we'll be on the agenda for the next, when is that again? 19th or something?
19th.
Yeah. So we'll do the rest then.
Okay. Any further discussion? Do I hear a motion to approve COA 19-098?
I can do it.
Okay, thank you.
Upon due consideration of the application package submitted for a certificate of appropriateness, COA 19-098, the testimony given in the Historic Preservation Commission concludes the following: that the applicant has satisfied the burden of persuasion and the project as proposed, subject to any conditions imposed by the commission, is congruous with the special character of the Pinehurst Historic District and consistent with Historic District guidelines. A certificate of appropriateness is hereby granted for the reasons stated.
Thank you. We have a motion by Jim McChesney. Is there a second?
Second?
Eric Von Saltzen seconded the motion. Do I hear, let's vote on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The motion carried. You're welcome. We have another bit of business, which is the demolition of a structure which is not strictly in our jurisdiction, but go ahead and tell us about a structure that I walk by that building just about every morning, and I never knew that structure was there, hidden in the back behind a jungle, so.
And obviously you didn't sneeze too hard because it was still there.
That is correct. There was a structure discovered, and I use this word discovered intentionally, at 25 Community Road. The owner of the property was doing some clearing and trying to get that vegetation under control, and in the process discovered a structure that was historic, but we have deemed it not in a safe manner to occupy or to use. So in your packet, we included a little staff report, and in that packet, we have a picture of the structure. We got some tin roof, we got some bricks, and we got a place that can't be habited or redone to where it could be. So both our building safety and our code compliance officer have certified this as an uninhabitable, unsafe structure.
And so this is for our knowledge.
This
that
is
you're
for your
showing us
knowledge.
this and tells us something about what qualifies for demolition.
Yes.
And also demos that are not in our jurisdiction.
That is correct. We do need to back it up, though, to make sure that you guys are good with the minor work items.
Okay.
I want to go back one quick.
Okay,
That 25 Community Road is in the historical.
it is.
Yes.
Okay, so
It
from
is.
that sense, it is in our jurisdiction, but we're overridden by the
PDO.
PDO that says, even if it is, we can't do anything about it if they determine it to be.
Yeah, if it's a hazard to health and a danger. So it's in our jurisdiction, but we don't have authority over this kind of a demolition.
It's correct. It's just a courtesy because it is in the historic district to let you guys know that we're doing it. So if you see or hear somebody ask you questions since they know that you guys are on this board, you can be like, well, we didn't approve it because it was deemed unsafe.
Pete, out of curiosity, historically, what was this used for?
Storage, miscellaneous storage over the years. So that's what it was used for. It was used for stacking materials. That's all I got on it.
And I think positionally, this is not really visible from Community
No, it's
Road.
located in the rear yard, and until in the last month or two, when they were doing vegetation clearing, nobody knew it was there. So
Outstanding.
There may not be anybody alive that knew that was there.
That's new.
Well, other than the cats, maybe, but.
I think it might be a Pinecrest Inn property.
That is correct.
Well, moving on to minor works, are there any questions about the minor work approvals for the last month?
I have none.
All right, so we will be,
We have one more thing. I presented you guys in your packets the draft language. Last meeting, we talked about changes to the historic guidelines. I just wanted to get some feedback to see if you guys had any comments on those languages that I proposed. If not,
everyone have a chance to take a look at that?
looks like we have some red line marks.
My only question was, with field of play being defined as where golf activity occurs, that would seem to preclude other places such as tennis courts, trotting tracks, training tracks where people often do other things. And if that's intentional, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that.
We just copied the definition that was used in the previous guideline iterations. It was something that was supposed to be carried forward, but in the rewrite it just wasn't. So I can't speak to the other ones being protected, but I know it's intentionally that the golf activities are. Specifically, it's just golf maintenance. So like if they were going to change a tee set or they're going to modify a cart path or maintain the fences on their property, they could. They would still have to come to us if they were going to put up a building. You know, basically think anything that's a habitable physical structure that's more than golf, they would still come before us, but this allows them to do their daily activities without having to come through the Historic Preservation Board.
However, this came up when Mr. Farron came to you about putting up a temporary structure.
That is correct.
And so that falls under the rubric of minor work item?
Correct. But it would, so under field of play, they could get protected under golf operations, but that doesn't mean when you place a structure that you're protected. They'd still have to come in and get a COA because it'd be a historic, it'd be new construction or something like that. We just don't regulate their cart paths, their golf course maintenance, fences, routine maintenance for them.
Well, and it also makes clear that there's a boundary between the property owners who are next to the golf course. Makes clear that there's a point beyond which they have no no ownership.
That is correct too. You can't build within 30 feet of a golf course in the rear setback.
So that needs to be clear. Yeah, I was wondering about small structures, minor work structures, whether those should be included.
When you say minor structures, what would you mean by that?
Like the temporary structures or a structure under, under 12 square feet,
Under 12 square feet?
and also demolition. I mean, would there be a situation where they might need to demo?
Not that I'm aware of for things that would be protected under field of play. You're talking about demolition of fences, which are covered within the guidelines of being something that can be carried out through a minor COA, so it wouldn't be a issue for demolitions for what field of play is protecting.
But they would still have to come to you for staff approval for a minor work,
Yes,
and so that is understood.
yes.
Okay.
I want to go back and bring up what was brought up there before, though. I understand this is what we had, and you're just simply moving that forward. Do we need to include tennis courts, whatever else may fit in that category in this thing or not? Or is there no real need to do that? I don't know the answer to that. I'm asking the question.
Well, and I would think we would need to ask Mr. Farron, because he's in charge of really grounds. We think of that as the courses, but there's croquet courts, bowling greens.
That's correct. That's
And
my
By
point.
definition, grounds going to include all grounds.
Okay. And it just specifies golf activity. So it's a good question. It's a good question to take back to him to see if he might prefer a little expansion to the terminology here.
I mean, it's just a question. I mean, I don't,
Not making a recommendation.
yeah.
then we could let it
The only
stand.
place it applies is over at the resort. I don't think there are any other tennis courts, a private tennis court would not be covered by this.
No.
And there aren't any others in
No,
the historic
no,
district that
no.
I'm aware of,
No.
nor space to construct them if someone were of such a mind.
Well,
That's not to say that they couldn't have them. They're doing a big
Well-
modification to the lake out there.
I suppose the property across the street from the brewery, in theory, is large enough to put tennis courts or something else in, if,
But then, is that
well,
considered
but they
field
don't
of
own
play?
that.
no, true.
I can't, off the top of me, really think of anything at this point that would there, and these are chiseled in granite, so if something comes up in the future, we may have to revisit it. But I think this would clarify the bulk of what we're talking about now, and we kind of agreed that it was left out of what we did. So we're kind of moving it forward. I think we'll cover what we currently know as an issue, and you could probably hypothetically carry on six hours worth of conversation on what might happen.
And I'm assuming if we recommend this, council has to approve it to formally go in. And I think this would be
Yes.
the least controversial way to get this covered,
Yeah.
because it was apparently an innocent omission.
Yes.
I think I'm going to change my comment to a recommendation that we approve it.
Well, there's more.
There-
Because
there's
we
more,
we
yeah.
decided that we would
Oh, so
not
we-
take, more than, we wanted to make a package for the council. We didn't
Okay,
want to
but
pepper them
I
with
was just
recommendations.
Looking to see if anybody, I guess, an idea of whether this is okay to people, because if we're going to do it as a package and we bump one of these out, the package is dead then.
Well, and it's really important to reinstate this.
I agree. So that's why I was asking if there were any, I guess, other thoughts on it than mine.
I just had two slight editorial suggestions. In the fifth line, it says field of play is excluded from these, and then there's a word omitted, which I assume should be guidelines.
Sure.
And then the last word in the document says regulations, but I think that should be guidelines too, shouldn't it? To be consistent.
It could be, yes, sir.
Good catch.
50 years as a lawyer, you know.
So, and then in demolitions, if we're ready to move on, we noticed there was some conflict between different sections with site features. So we changed the language to demolition guidelines apply to all structures and site features such as pools. Or sorry, my bad. We changed it from demolition guidelines apply to all structures and site features such as pools and gazebos within the Pinehurst District to demolition guidelines apply to all structures within the Pinehurst Historic District except those specified under minor works. So that way we weren't requiring demolition permits for pools, which are allowed under minor works, and replacement or tearing down of fences, which are allowed under minor works.
So we're using the second one to replace the first one. In
Correct.
italics.
I think that's good.
The next one was also a minor adjustment in language. We changed minor works to an approval, to approve COA prior to work being completed would be a minor work, but we changed it to minor work changes to an approved CO prior to the work being completed, except in the cases where those changes fall under the category of major work. That way it's more clear to staff and to people who are laymen reading it that if there's a change that would be considered major work, it'd be elevated to major work and have to come back to you guys.
Is there a minor work that can be considered a major work?
If staff deems it, it can be. So if there's enough minor changes to a site that I think that it's become a major issue, I can elevate it. Or if there's something I don't feel comfortable with, for instance, you could have 3 different types of fences on your property that's allowed in the guidelines, but would I feel comfortable approving 3 different styles of fencing? I don't know. I'd bring it to you guys. That's just an example.
My understanding is you can always, even minor work, if you don't feel comfortable with it, you can bring a minor work item to it and push it up to here as well.
That is correct.
So there's no preclusion of any level coming to here.
But this proposed language has the advantage that to a homeowner who's trying to to deal with this, it specifically refers to major work, and that highlights what it is they should be concerned about. Is this, so I'll look in the major work section and see if that sounds like what it is that I'm trying to do.
Correct.
Well, and these are changes to an already approved COA. So, you know, there was a case, it was actually the Midland Road case, that you let us know that the homeowner and the architect had come back with some changes, and it had to do with window sizes and,
So changing of window sizes, or in some cases, removal of windows that was proposed. Technically, the house has not been constructed yet, but you did remove a window from what was approved, so that would have to come back to the HPC because removal of windows is a major work item.
And that's what I think this says, effectively.
that's what has brought about this change in language.
Much clearer.
It's clearer, it's easier, or it's more efficient for Peter as he's, you know, working with applicants.
Yeah, it makes it cleaner, I think.
mhm.
And then the final change is in the inclusion of an inspection section. So we talked about how you apply for one, how you get approved for one. We don't talk about the back end, which is after I've approved you for one, I call you up and say, hey, is your work done? Can I come out and inspect your property? And this is just to kind of highlight, oh, you made a change, we have to go through this process again, and call me back when you've rectified or fill out a new application for COA. So it's just an addition to the guidebook to help out people understand the process.
And this does need a little editorial work as well.
Okay.
I think the point to be made first, though, before we get into the details, is that obviously you have found in inspecting finished projects that there have been deviations from the COA approved plans.
That is correct.
So, you know, this is a problem that's come up in the inspection process, and we need to deal with it.
For minor COAs, they're pretty good about building what they propose. For major COAs, not always, because
Yeah.
construction happens and, you know, people make changes for financial reasons to swap out material or do something like that,
Yeah.
you know, changes the product that I get when I go inspect. So it's more of an issue for major.
So this is an inspection beyond the planning inspection. This is a second, just specifically for COA.
Correct. So when they finalize their fence, they call me out, so I make sure that the fence was built to 6 feet in the rear yard, 4.5 in the side yard, and 3.5 in the front, and that they built a shadow box instead of a solid wood fence. It's just to make sure what they applied for is what they did.
And
if
you
they
would be
didn't-
surprised the number of times they
Oh,
do
I-
something different.
No, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Terry Lertz made a suggestion that you can consider, and he suggested maybe the commissioners could help in this inspection, you know, keeping track of projects as they proceed. When they're finished, maybe, you know, serving as notifiers, alerts.
Okay.
And commissioners could, I mean, we could formalize it to the point of each commissioner taking a certain area of the historic district and kind of making that their beat. This is just, you know, an idea that he brought to me if you wanted, if you felt like you needed.
So from
more-
my perspective, it's not a staff time issue.
Okay.
It's just letting people know that you change, it's going to delay the process on your side. I have ample time to go inspect all these properties.
Okay.
It's not a,
And I have another point to that, too, and I think that's outside the scope of what we're here to do, and I would be very cautious about trying to include that into the scope of what the HPC's job is.
Well, I wasn't thinking of formalizing it in the guidelines, but it was a suggestion.
Informally, I'd be cautious about doing that, at least until I took it to council to make sure that we're within the scope of what our legal ability is. And I think if we move to staff work, you might be crossing a boundary that you don't want to cross.
We are more the judicial branch than we are the executive branch.
Right.
We're not
That's a good way to
responsible.
look at it.
Compliance is not our responsibility.
No.
No,
Ours is
And,
determining standards and
Peter, I'm inexcusably ignorant about how things work here. In other places where I'm familiar, when a project is completed, a final inspection is necessary in order to get your certificate of occupancy or whatever it is that allows the owner to use the property. How does that work here?
So for my process, there's a COA. So that's the historic stuff. And then for our building inspections department, there's a certificate of occupancy that allows you to move in. There's very little historic things that I would hold up someone's CO for. I can't really think it's a good thing to hold up a CO for somebody not putting shutters on. But that's the difference, is I'm an exterior guy. I'm just making sure that it looks like everything else in the district. And then we have people who are making sure that structurally it's sound and that it's meeting our building code.
Suppose we had approved the project where it specifically said that the shutters would be black, okay? And we even thought that was important aesthetically. And they decided in the middle of construction to have blue shutters, pale baby blue shutters, and you go out there and inspect it. Now, that's not what we approved.
That is correct.
What is your path?
The way I would say it is that's a minor COA unless you guys placed a condition that the shutters had to be black. So let's say baby blue was an approved color within our palette wheel. I would just treat that as a minor COA because we are allowed to change colors through a minor COA process. But if you placed a condition, part of the case that says it has to be black, then it's tying it. So at that point, it would have to be black and come back to you guys for that change.
But just a second, if I may. We approve these things based on information that is presented to us.
That's correct.
And with respect to the Midland Roadhouse, some of the colors were a significant issue at one point in the process, ultimately overcome. And I guess if they're substituting one for another and they're both in the color palette, I don't have any problem with that, I don't think.
But
somewhere-
Eric makes the point, if it's a substantial change, and that's really our benchmark for a major work as compared to a minor work, substantial change.
Just to make sure I understand what you're saying. It's a job where they obviously have to have a P and Z sign off on it, right? They have to have a certificate of occupancy. They could theoretically get that certificate of occupancy before they met the COA requirements. Is that correct?
I wouldn't hold up the COA for minor issues. So if it's a paint color, I wouldn't hold up them moving into their home. I'd sign off like a temporary COA or CO, which would be a 6-month CO, so they would get there and have time to repaint, and then I'd reapproach the situation. But holding up someone moving into their home for a paint color isn't something that I could do.
Yeah, well,
That's
it's,
not
and I'm
even-
not
that's-
saying, I'm just saying, I'm not asking about
Yeah.
the change that it would be. I'm just asking, if I'm building a new house in the historic district, I have my COA, I have all my building permits, I have everything. To get the final closure on the planning side, I do not have to have an inspection on.
You have to have an inspection.
Okay,
and I would
that's
sign
my
off,
question.
Yes,
So they can't get the CO.
without my sign off.
Without your sign off. And then your control from there is if you don't agree with something, you can give them a temporary one. They can still get their,
They can still move in, they can still do that, but unless it was very serious, there's no way I wouldn't issue that temporary one.
okay. So because my question is, so the COs, that is the certificate of occupancy cannot be signed off until you have at least done your inspection. Okay, that was my question,
Sorry.
because I wanted to make sure.
That's building department.
Yes.
We're the same department, so we're the planning and building inspections department.
So you can't get your CO until you've at least had the historical inspection.
Yes.
Whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, you can sort out afterwards, but you cannot they won't issue the
In that
CO
case,
until.
I function as both the zoning official and the historic
Okay,
planner.
so then
I'm
you're
doing
doing
both inspections.
Okay. That answers my question, though, because that's the final hammer. I can't just get a CO and a certificate of occupancy, and then
never-
6 months from now go, oops, I forgot my inspection for the COA.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have a stack of files on my desk that I go through and make sure that we're, all right, it's been 6 months, it's time to call someone to make sure that they've
Right, and
finished
I
their
understand that,
project.
and I'm not trying to,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to understand the sequencing, because that's really the important part, I think, is that sequencing too. They can't move in until they've at least had the inspection, and then the results of the inspection are whatever they are.
And that would apply pretty much primarily to new construction. For alterations or additions.
Yeah, otherwise they
not
wouldn't
necessarily.
have to have, well, they still have to have a building permit if there are going to be major changes to the
Correct.
building anyway, so they're still going to need a sign off on that. Okay. That was all my concern. I just, as long as they have to get the inspection, I'm happy with it.
Alex 2 years ago, and my rendering had black shutters. We changed it to blue, but we handled it as a minor. That's,
Good guess, though.
definitely had, when you said Midland Road, I said, off the hook. But it was an efficient way to handle it, but I assume if the black shutters were specifically tied to that, I would understand.
Right.
And that would be an issue, but it wasn't, and Alex was kind enough to work with me and say, you've got 8 weeks to get this done, make sure it's done. I had to write a letter, there was a representation, there was so I guess it just comes down to how important it is to, and how substantial that color change is to that house.
Exactly.
And then we would deem that, put those conditions up front, and then you would have the ability to hold them to it. Yeah.
Could be why Alex is sitting over there now, I don't know.
He's enjoying the fact he ain't sitting over here.
Well, but getting back to what Peter has proposed to us, I do like the different ways that people can negotiate an approval, if there are discrepancies, because if there is a substantial discrepancy, then they should, arrange for another hearing, and I think they should have to pay that $500 fee, which in a sense, it operates like a fine, and we've always been
It's-
slow to do that.
Be very cautious of those words. Operates like a fine.
Well,
It's not, the reality is, we don't have anything to say about the fees that are charged.
well.
We're out of
so-
that business.
But that
Go.
was implicit, so.
Okay.
Well, in Washington DC, for example.
Can you speak in the mic, sir?
When I was practicing in Washington DC, one of the big issues for apartment buildings that were built in the 1930s was casement windows. And nobody who owns an apartment building wants casement windows, but the Art Deco Society, a very powerful organization in Washington, D.C., wants casement windows. So if you applied for renovation of one of those apartment buildings, you could not get it approved unless you provided for casement windows. You could come in with all the modern alternatives to casement. No, we won't do it. It's got to be old-fashioned casement windows, crank out, and so forth and so on. So I'm just, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, suppose one of my clients was devious enough to get the approval on that basis and then put in modern casement windows, what would happen? Well, what would have happened then is they couldn't have gotten their certificate of occupancy. And I'm assuming, therefore, from what you've said, Peter, that there are things that somebody could do to vary from what it is we approved that's bad enough that, leave aside the 6-month thing, because obviously that's a separate issue. They're going to have to commit to solve the problem within that 6-month period. But whether it's, whatever it is, they could depart far enough from what it is that we have approved that you would not pass them.
Yes. So a good example would be a Midland Road project where the sizing of the windows had to change to meet code. That would happen because of a minor COA. So I issued that minor COA because the code required it.
Right.
But if it didn't, because that was a contentious case, we probably would have brought it back.
I think that's the right answer, personally.
In
Get some
terms of,
editorial.
in terms of just small detail, on your second paragraph, your point number 2, the planner will visit your project site. In the A portion, during the inspection, the planner will compare the work based on the approved plans. Do we need to say COA, approved plans? Or approved plans will do it. will compare the work based on the approved plans and ensure, you don't need the ing. And that was what all I caught. Anybody else?
I think, Molly, you were highlighting the removal of the word "be" in there.
Yes. Yes. I think what Peter needs from us before we present this to the council is a vote. No. Not a vote.
You guys would just be giving a recommendation.
Okay.
You wouldn't vote on it.
Okay.
But this was brought forward to you so I can make these changes. Next time, you guys will say you recommend it, and then at that point, we'll start the process of taking it to the...
Yeah, and that'll
Like
be
to see
good,
the final
and that'll be
version.
good timing for the council
That's
because it'll
correct.
be first of the year. Yes.
I'd like to see the final version, not, we've made modifications to this and discussions, and see the final version that I'm approving.
Okay.
Yeah, unintentionally.
But that's all I had for you guys.
Okay. Well, I think then, yes, comments from attendees. John Strickland.
Mayor, or soon-to-be mayor.
Soon to be.
Mayor-elect.
I'm speaking loud enough, I guess. John Strickland, 6 Village Lane. With 2 other members of the village citizenry, I've been in other parts of the building today doing our orientation. We'll be taking office on December the 2nd. However, realizing that you were meeting today, I wanted to come over. I'm going to make an effort to visit all the committees and commissions early on after going into office here on December the 2nd. But realizing you were here today, I just wanted to thank you for your work. Appreciate very much what this commission does. I was a former member of it, very highly regarded across the town, and certainly in the recent campaign, I would have to say that on the minds of most of the citizens that I came into contact with, or in the different forums that were held publicly, the work of this commission, the historic district, all of that is very important to Pinehurst. And so on behalf of those folks, I thank you for your work and look forward to working with you in the future as we go forward.
Thank
That's
you.
my comment.
Thank you, and congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming and visiting us. Appreciate it.
Time for a motion to
A
adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Don Taylor moved that we adjourn. Tom Schroeder seconded the motion. All in favor? Aye. All right. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.